Hello everybody, this is FIDE Master Ingvar Johannesson from Iceland, and I welcome you to this series I will be doing about mating patterns. In this series, like I said, we're only going to concern ourselves with mating patterns, but I believe pattern training in general is very important. And I've read in many places, and I believe this to be true, that the difference between a strong player and a weaker player, no matter where you go in the rank, between 1300, 1600, 2400, 2600, the difference is basically going to be the stronger player will know more patterns. I mean, whether he realizes it or not. When you're a grandmaster, you're gonna have like tens of thousands of patterns in your head, because you've seen them, you expose yourself to them, and you remember them. And such a pattern recognition is gonna manifest itself, for instance, in blitz games, where the strong player will simply know what to do, what to move, because he's been exposed to the position before, the type of position, the mates, the tactics, etc. So, okay, but like I said, this is mating patterns, and this is our first mating pattern, and it has a name. It's called Anastasia mate, and I believe it derives its name from a novel from 1803 called Anastasia and Chess. German novel, and in that novel we have this checkmate. White plays knight e7, the king has to move, and now rook to h5, and this is checkmate. And our basic pattern, and it's important that the knight covers these squares. Then we have the rook on the h file delivering checkmate, and actually, can be anywhere on the h file from h1 to h5. And from there it delivers checkmate. So this is the basic form of checkmate. How we get there is usually slightly different. I think this pattern in modern chess most often emerges through a queen sacrifice like this. So again, of course, a fabricating position because white is up too much material. But here's the mate: knight e7 check, king h8, and now queen takes h7. And again, we have the same position as in the example before, and now rook h5 mate. And of course, the reason that this usually arrives like this is because it's fairly rare to have a castled king and no pawn on the h file. So usually we arrive at the mate like this. Now, knowing this pattern, there's also kind of an opening trap, if you know this opening. So this is the Ruy Lopez, and actually this can arise in, I think, 2 lines of the Ruy Lopez. But we concern ourselves with this one. Okay, it's outside our scope, but just a quick refutation of knight takes e3, knight takes e7, and then check. Followed by this Well, knight takes c8 is not really useful because knight is trapped, but knight g6. Some old lines ahead. Okay, rook takes e5, bishop e7, knight d5. We're down a piece, but we're going to win the piece of e7. Black castles. Knight takes e7 check, king h8, and now queen h5. And having seen the introduction, you should be well aware of white's little threat. However, if you go into any database, Chessbase, or any kind of database that you might have, you will find many games in the database where black will play d6. And I'm gonna admit I was the victim of this once 9 years ago in a blitz game. I played d6 and I got hit immediately by queen takes h7 and rook h5 checkmate. Okay, again, it's outside of our scope for this video, but it's pretty neat how g6 doesn't really help. If you play d6 now, you have rook h5, g takes, and queen f6. So a little opening trap for you, small bonus. Okay, next let's look at a clean, simple example from a game. It's black to move, so material is equal. Well, actually, white has a massive pawns, but here we see the pattern with some more pieces on the board. White is threatening a rook on d6, but obviously not aware of black's threat, which he executed here. And you have of course seen knight e2 check, king h1, and of course queen takes h2. And we have our beloved Anastasia mate on the table. So, when looking at games between super grandmasters, usually we don't see mates at all. Usually they're going to resign. They're going to lose a pawn. They're going to resign. They're going to have a lot standing. They're going to resign. So usually we don't see checkmates in these games, but that doesn't mean that we don't see the patterns emerge in these games. And this game is between Vladimir Kramnik with white against Ushi Alan with black. And, well, Alan didn't mate Kramnik. This game was a draw. But he used our theme, Anastasia mate, to indirectly defend or not defend his pawn on g5. He played knight f4. His pawn on g5 was hanging. And Kramnik played king h1. So the natural question is, why didn't he take the pawn on g5, which was hanging? The reason is, the pawn is indirectly defended, because if you take the pawn, you're gonna get mated. And of course you can see the mate. If you haven't seen it, pause it and come back. Of course it's knight e2 check, king h1. And since in capturing the pawn on g5, the queen left the h file, we have this option available. Checkmate on the next move, because the queen can only interpose on h4, h5, and h6, and we will capture the queen on that square next move and win. I also saw another recent game between Lekko and Gelfand, played in one of those Grand Prix. And here Lekko played queen c2. Realizing what the threat was, Gelfand simply played rook f e8, but again, the threat is there. Even though we're not going to see it being fully executed, the threat is there. And if black was a weaker player, he might have taken on a2, thinking my queen is gonna escape. Rook a3, the queen can escape to c4. But of course, if he had done that, we would have seen the Anastasia mate right here. So these patterns, they exist in Super Grandmaster games, even though we don't maybe see them materialize every time, or at all, to be honest. Okay, well, we'll look into that. Yes. So here we have a game where white won quickly. He can probably retreat the bishop, and he's going to be better because of the threat of knight g6. But there are two moves to basically finish the game on the spot. And naturally they're going to be related to a theme, so I ask you to find one of those tools or both of those moves. And the way to win here is simply rook a3 or rook e3. And both have the same threat. The threat of Anastasia mate. Apparently, black only saw the threat of rook h3 doubling on the h-file, threatening mate, so he played f takes g5. But of course, that doesn't help because we still have the Anastasia mate set up, so queen takes h7. And now black realized and he resigned. Here is one of the more funnier examples I found. Here, black, the underrated player in this game for sure. I think he was 200 or 300 rating points below his opponent. But here he's completely winning. He's up the exchange and 3 pawns. And he has 2 connected passers and the rook behind the passer, so white doesn't seem to have any counterplay whatsoever. So black fell on his guard. He played b4. Still, this is not catastrophic. Knight e7, king h8. Nothing happening yet. But knowing the pattern, he cunningly played king g2. And probably, put on a little act like he was upset, losing against a lower rated player. I'm just gonna play my king here, Can't believe I'm losing here. And black completely fell for it. I mean, of course he can play h6 or whatever, but you saw the his opponent was in a foul mode. Played b3, attacking the queen, attacking the knight. But I'm sure after white's next move, which you've all seen, of course, queen takes h7. Well, after king takes h7, rook h1, and nothing can interpose on the h-file. I'm pretty sure that black went home crying to his mommy. Oh, he blew the completely winning position against the 2200 rated player. But you have to be aware. You have to finish the job. And you saw in this game that just knowing this mating pattern, it could save you from a completely losing game just by being a little sneaky here. King g2. I'm not doing anything. Yes, I am. Queen takes h7. So, yeah. I found that pretty funny. So, now we have a game between Hammer and Carlsen. Yes, Carlsen, Magnus Carlsen. So this is from 2003, 6 years ago, when he was pretty young still. The under 14 World Championships, playing against his fellow Norwegian, Jon Ludvig Hammer, who is now a Grandmaster as well. Of course, not as strong as Carlsen, but strong in his own right. Rook takes e4, and I'm not sure what white was up to here. Maybe he thought he would win the knight, but it seems to me the knight can still come to f4. That's a queen f3, queen e5, and retain the knight. However, all that doesn't really matter because black can force the issue here. And knowing our pattern, you have to do it slightly differently this time, but it's the same stuff. And you should have found by now the move. Queen h5 check. Slightly different this time. Removing the t-pawn, which was obstructing the rook from delivering the mate on h4. And again, our knight covering g1 and g3, and the rook delivering checkmate on the h file. Okay. On we go. Here's a famous game between Milan Whitmore with white against world champion Max Uwe with black. And Uwe is threatening checkmate on h2, for which he has sacrificed the rook. So probably he thought he was winning here, but white didn't agree. Rook e8. He has to interpose. The king comes to h7, the queen comes to d3, taking up the rook on c2. So bishop f8. Rook takes, king takes, and now knight f5. And over resigned here because of this. And what is this? King takes f8. This is basically Anastasia mate, but sort of from the side or mirrored. This knight here on f5 serves exactly the same purpose as the knight on e7. It covers two key squares, g8 and g6, but this time those squares are turned into g7 and e7. And here the 8th rank has turned into the h file for the rook to deliver mate. So the queen f8 mate was basically the same sacrifice as the queen takes h7 we usually see. So the same function of the pieces, but slightly confusing because it's not from the angle we're used to. But you see, knowing the pattern, you can transpose it into other areas of the board. So we have two more examples. We're going to look at a short game here between Roth and Reina. This is a King's Gambit, and we're just going to go fairly quickly over this game. Knight f3, hitting the queen. He gets the piece back here on e3. And bishop g4. I'm not sure why it didn't take on c2. Okay, bishop e2, and white is slightly ahead in development here. And now he played knight f5, which is slightly cunning, threatening the pawn g7. And black thought, what's more natural than castling? Developing the rook and taking care of the pawn on g7. Next, black will play knight out, knight d7, and then rook to e8 check or something, and we shouldn't have problems. Unfortunately, we realized that he's not going to get any chance to materialize these ideas because knight e7 check. And now, instead of sacrificing a queen, sacrificing a rook is going to do the exact same thing. Rook takes h7, followed by rook h1, and it's checkmate. Anastasia mate, as we all know by now. And our final example. It's from a blitz game, but it shows that even strong players will fall for this. With the white pieces is Jesus Nogueras, a legendary player from Cuba. Used to be probably the second strongest player behind, of course, Casablanca. But now they have some strong players like Dominguez, so he might be moving down the ladder. I'm not gonna be the judge of that. And black is Goran Todorovic, a strong grandmaster from an experienced one from the former Yugoslavia. And here he played Queen b4, which looks like a silly move for a grandmaster. I mean, Knight c6, forking the Queen and Rook, but of course he's a grandmaster, so this was a trick. Queen to c3, hitting the knight and threatening Queen c3, which with the inclusion of the bishop here is going to be checkmate. Unfortunately, he tricked himself a little bit because it's white who is doing the tricking with knight e7. He's not going to take the rook, he's going to take the mate. But this time it's the queen delivering the checkmate. So, this was our final example of Anastasia mate. And, well, by this time you should know this pattern thoroughly. Should be able to apply it in your games and not miss any opportunities to use it. So, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you soon in further videos on mating patterns. So, see you later. Bye bye.